want to start with this. I decided to go down to the Black Lives Matter protest on Saturday over the weekend. And I went down there for a couple different reasons. Not to protest myself. I'm just not a protester. I've never protested when it came to anything. It doesn't matter what the subject is. I wanted to go down there just to see it firsthand for myself. And kind of the same reason why I wanted to go down to one of these, get us out of quarantine protests. The same reason why I went to one of those. You can watch all this stuff on TV, but it does absolutely no justice unless you go down there yourself and you see it in person. Now, you call me sheltered if you want, but I'm 40 years old and I've never seen a line of police officers with shields in person. I've only seen those images on TV. And I saw it in person on Saturday night, and it was shocking. I'll be honest with you. It was shocking. I've never seen anything like that before. I also saw a bunch of people getting in officers' faces and screaming and yelling at them, the ones with the shields. And my first reaction to that was, what good are you doing? I understand you're angry, you're frustrated, but do you really think that's going to do any good by screaming and yelling and getting in these police officers' faces? I just don't think throwing rocks at police officers and acting like a buffoon is going to change anything. Now, with that being said, there were a lot of peaceful protesters in Las Vegas. Again, right now I'm just talking about Las Vegas. That night, yes, they did break into a pawn shop. And when I say they, I don't mean everybody. I don't even mean the majority. I mean there was a small percentage of bad actors, probably some I would imagine that maybe don't even live here in Las Vegas, that decided to loot a local pawn shop. Now, I left a few minutes before the tear gas started going. I was lucky. I saw a few hundred people coming towards me, a bunch of protesters, and I thought that was it. And then 5 minutes later, I saw literally thousands of people. I would say minimum 3,000 people walking down Las Vegas Boulevard, starting downtown. A ton of people. And I was with a friend of the show, Chris, who took some video, posted it on our social media page. Check it out. It's pretty crazy. I've never seen a protest that large before in person in Las Vegas. It was crazy. But again, let me just say this. There's a lot of people on the right. There's a lot of people that are saying, this has nothing to do with George. This has nothing to do with it. Let me tell you, that's not true. There were some bad actors. There was a small percentage of people that were acting like idiots. But the majority of those protesters were there because they had a cause, and they felt like it was important to be there to talk about these issues that are facing, minorities every day. I believe the majority of those people in Las Vegas were good people. This wasn't a political protest. I didn't see one political sign. I didn't see one Joe Biden sign. I didn't see one Donald Trump sign. This was about race relations. And that's important. I think it's important to note that. This has nothing to do with politics. People are fed up. People are angry. Now, with that being said, that doesn't mean that it's okay to burn down buildings. Now, luckily, to my knowledge, none of that happened here. We did have some minor looting that was going on. But to my knowledge, this was not Minneapolis or other cities or L.A. The majority of the people did a good job. And as soon as I leave, I would imagine this is when the looting started, because I didn't see any looting. Police, put out the tear gas and the rubber bullets, and I got out of there.
There was some sort of looting incident at Easy Pawn downtown. Yeah. Now, I did talk over the weekend, guys, to the owner or the manager of Easy Pawn and asked him what happened and if he'd like to talk about it. He said no comment. But it was reported that there was some kind of damage done down there. At Easy
there was a Easy Pawn and also MedMen. There was a couple places on Fremont Street that were looted. And the reason that, in my opinion, that there wasn't looting and rioting, because across the country, every single protest during the day, and some actually turned into riots during the day, but almost every single protest during the day turned into a looting or a riot at night, is because Steve Sisolak did an outstanding job of getting the SWAT team involved in the National Guard before any of this really could take place. So I give Governor Sisolak a lot of credit for protecting Las Vegas, protecting downtown Summerlin, protecting Fremont Street by calling the National Guard.
I want to talk about, the problem we have in this country right now. Obviously, there's two different issues here we could talk about. The number one issue should be race relations and the issues with police brutality and the way minorities have been treated for decades and maybe hundreds of years. You won't hear about this very much on Fox News. You won't hear Laura Ingraham talk about this. You won't hear Sean Hannity talk about this. What you're going to hear them talk about is the looting and the rioting. Now, that's the other issue, but my opinion is very simple. Don't just talk about the looting and rioting. Talk about both issues and understand why we got here in the first place. Now, there's two different types of people. I think there's very intelligent people, and then there's very ignorant people. Now, who are the ignorant people? Well, certainly those 4 police officers in Minneapolis are ignorant, and I hope all 4 of them go to jail for a very long time. Any police officer who looks at someone based on race, skin color, and treats them differently than if you're white, you're ignorant. You're racist. That's number one. And then we have ignorant people on the other side. I think the majority of the protesters are good people that are there because they're angry, they're frustrated, they want their voices heard, and their voices should be heard. There's nothing wrong with protesting. But the ignorant ones are the bad actors, the ones that are looting, the ones that are stealing beer, the ones that are lighting buildings on fire, the ones that are screaming obscenities at police officers and throwing rocks at police officers. Those are ignorant people. We need to call out the ignorant people on both sides, the racism, the mistreatment, and then the rioters and the looters. They're ignorant people. Now, in between all those ignorant people on both sides, there are smart people. There are smart protesters. There are protesters and leaders and intelligent people that are just fed up. They're angry. They're angry with the way minorities, maybe themselves, maybe others, have been treated for hundreds of years with very little action. As proof of what happened in Minneapolis, as proof of what happened in the Ahmaud Arbery safe. So those are the smart people.
You're acting as if Derek Chauvin was not convicted or was not charged with third-degree murder 3 days ago, well before.
Okay. So I will get
to
that.
These new riots took place, Brian.
I will get to that.
And the narrative was the only reason it took place in Minneapolis was because it took so long for him to be charged.
So
clearly that's not the case.
So I don't know why.
Clearly that doesn't make a difference.
I don't know why you would think that. That's not what I was saying. I'm just giving my opinions on the ignorant people that are involved in all this and the smart people. I wasn't talking about that specifically. We will get to that, but that's not how I feel, so you're wrong. What I was saying was the smart people, okay, are the people that want change, the protesters out there that want their voices heard. And then I do believe we have some smart politicians out there. I do believe we have some smart leadership out there. I do believe we have some smart police officers out there that are also upset. Many of those, I shouldn't say many, but some of those police officers were taking knees over the weekend. Some of those police officers were actually protesting with the protesters. That made me feel really good. That I do believe that there are police officers out there that care. I do believe that there are politicians out there that want action. I do believe that. I believe the mayor of Atlanta is fantastic. She is fantastic in the words that she has used. She's able, as an African-American woman, to call out the rioters and the protesters and at the same time talk about why people are so upset. She's very articulate, and I appreciate her leadership there. I really do. So the point I was trying to make is that there are a lot of dopes on both sides, and there are some smart people on both sides. We need to call out those ignorant people, get them the hell out of there. And I want the smart people to be able to do their job, make change, because that's what this is all about, right? It's about making change so minorities don't have to suffer as they do suffer, I believe, every day. Now, do I believe all African Americans, when they leave their door, are they being hunted? No, I don't believe that. I think that's an extreme. But with that being said, something needs to be done here. And our politicians need to work to get that done. Our leaders need to work to get that done. Rioting, throwing rocks at police officers, swearing, that's a whole other issue. That shouldn't happen. It's wrong, and they're criminals, and they should be called out for that. You're not doing anything for your cause in the name of this man by doing that. In fact, you're doing the opposite, by the way. Now, as far as what you said about third-degree murder, first of all, I want to play a bit of audio for you because I want to play the police chief in Minneapolis. I think this is a very emotional moment on live television. So, as you know, a lot of people throughout the country, and I'm one of them, believe those other 3 officers have to be charged with something. They have to be arrested. It's taken way too long. So just because one officer has been charged, it's not good enough. We need those other 3 officers charged with something. All the evidence, they have all the evidence they need. Now, it's not the police chief's job to charge them. The police chief can arrest them. That's a very different distinction. And this is the same police chief, keep in mind, that fired those officers immediately. Now, this is a moment on CNN, and it's a moment that I think is very powerful, where you have a reporter on CNN that is interviewing the police chief while in her earpiece you have a member of the George family and Benjamin Crumb. Now, I think Benjamin Crumb is a buffoon. I think he's a race baiter. He does this every time. He's another Al Sharpton, but nonetheless, he is representing the George family. And you have a member of the George family, and you have a CNN reporter that's saying, what do you want me to ask the police chief? This is a very powerful moment. The police chief takes off his hat after being asked a question when he finds out it's through the George family. So I want you to have a listen to this. This is a Floyd family member talking through an earpiece to a reporter, and this is the Minneapolis police chief answering a question directly. A very emotional moment. Have a listen to this.
This is the Floyd family right now?
This is the Floyd family.
To the Floyd family, being silent or not intervening, to me, you're complicit. So I don't see a level of distinction any different. Obviously, the charging and those decisions will have to come through our county attorney's office. Certainly the FBI is investigating that. But to the Floyd family, I want you to know that my decision to fire all 4 officers was not based on some sort of hierarchy. Mr. Floyd died in our hands, and so I see that as being complicit. So that is about as much as and I apologize to the Floyd family if I am not more clear, but I don't see a difference in terms of the ultimate outcome is he is not here with us.
You don't see a difference between what Officer Chauvin did and the 3 other officers some of who kneeled down as well, but some of whom just watched. You see that all as the same act.
Silence and inaction, you're complicit. You're complicit. If there were one solitary voice that would have intervened and act, that's what I would have hoped for. Unfortunately,
That's what you would have expected from your officers, yes?
Absolutely, and that did not occur.
All right, so I'm just going to say this right off the bat. I give this police chief a lot of credit because I think he's being very honest and he's calling out those 3 other officers. It certainly sounds to me that he wants those officers held accountable and arrested. Why it hasn't happened yet, I have no idea. I understand that the Floyd family, they're very upset. Maybe they weren't completely happy with that answer. You can't expect the police chief to answer that question by saying, well, I want those 3 officers to get the electric chair. That's just not going to happen. When have you heard a police chief say that his officers were complicit? When have you heard a police chief say that their silence is complicit? He took off his hat. He was very respectful to the Floyd family. Rightfully so. They deserve it. I think that was the absolute best answer you could get under these circumstances. I really do. As far as third-degree murder, from what I have heard from that officer, is that can change. It could go to second-degree murder. It could go to first-degree murder. The FBI is now involved. Those charges can be changed. It's not definite. Those were just the original charges that were filed. I'm not, and I think I don't speak alone when I say.
And do you know why third-degree murder is the charge right now?
Well, the FBI is also investigating.
Well, the autopsy came back and said that he did not die of strangulation, asphyxiation, or traumatic asphyxiation.
That's not the verbiage that was used.
No, that is the verbiage.
No,
that
it's
was
not.
Used. And there's been a second now, but the family has hired a forensic pathologist to do a second autopsy, and it's the same one that did the autopsy on Jeffrey Epstein.
JD, this is very important, the verbiage of that autopsy. So I'm going to explain to you exactly why that's not true. They said they couldn't see it, but they also said in the autopsy it's still possible he could have died in that manner. They said they physically couldn't see that, but they did not rule it out. He still could have died from asphyxia. They just didn't physically see it. There's a very important verbiage in that autopsy. So, no, they did not say he did not die from asphyxia. They said they couldn't physically see that he died from asphyxia. They did not rule it out. That's very important to use those words properly. That's exactly what they said. Now, so what, I say? I say, so what? We all saw the video. We all saw it. And I saw people on the right on Twitter that were saying, oh, this isn't going to play out really well for the – what are you talking about? Just because there was no physical evidence that the knee maybe didn't directly kill him, and by the way, we still don't know that, what we do know is that the man's knee was on his neck for 9 minutes.
Of course, that's why he's absolutely going to get, at the minimum, third-degree murder for this situation.
The autopsy did specifically cite police restraint.
Right.
Which is
police restraint.
Police restraint and underlying conditions.
Yeah, he had heart disease and hypertension.
Right. Right.
And he may have had intoxicants in his system. They don't know.
But that alone, according to the autopsy, that alone did not count. Police restraint at the very least, was a contributing factor.
Right.
Absolutely.
All three things together.
And basically, and I think the Minneapolis police chief would agree with this too. When someone is on their stomach, handcuffed, they are restrained, they are not going anywhere, and they say, "I can't breathe. Get your knee off my neck." I think it's reasonable to take your knee off that neck. instead of holding it there for 9 minutes.
Exactly, and I'm not going to let. And I'm not saying you're doing this, JD, but I'm not going to let anybody.
I'm actually not at all.
I just said that.
Okay.
I just said that. I'm not going to let anybody diminish what happened to George Floyd. I'm just not going to let that happen. We all saw the video. We all saw a man begging for his life. He could have had 10 ounces of cocaine in his system. I would still feel the same way. Now, I would say, well, he probably wasn't a very intelligent guy to have all those drugs in his system, maybe committing a felony, maybe resisting. But regardless of all those three things that I just mentioned, it does not excuse these four officers.
And Brian, I'm not saying it does excuse the four officers. I'm just saying
I didn't say you did.
That's why he's probably at this point not going to be charged with murder one or first-degree murder.
Well, we don't know yet. The FBI.
That is why.
Listen, I said from the beginning, before we knew what was in Floyd's body, I said it's going to be tough to get these people on these police officers on first-degree murder for a lot of different reasons. That's just one of the reasons. I said that, but there's no excuse why these three officers that have not been arrested yet have not. There's no excuse for that. There is literally no excuse that you can give me right now. Look at what is happening from state to state throughout the country. There's not one state in this country that hasn't had a protest in regards to this. Not one. And another thing I don't like it when people on the right are saying, well, I guess the coronavirus just disappeared. Listen, I criticized the Trump protests, as I like to call them, that took place last month, the last few months, the coronavirus. I criticized many of those people, not all of them, but I criticized many of them for not practicing.
You actually called some of them criminals for not practicing social distancing because they could be killing people and not knowing it.
Well, if you let me finish, I was going to get to that. And that's why I'm bringing
criticism is a understatement.
Okay, well,
for what you said about
that's why I'm bringing it up, but you're not letting me finish. The reason why I'm bringing it up is what you are talking about. So I'll start over. I criticized the Trump supporters, these Trump rallies, because that's what they were. Let's be honest. You don't see any Biden posters or Biden hats or anything at these protests because they're not political protests. Make no mistake about it. Those coronavirus protests were political protests. I criticized some of those people for not practicing social distancing. I compared it to driving drunk, involuntary manslaughter, because if someone's asymptomatic, you're not practicing social distancing. I'll say the same thing for many of these protests throughout the country, most of them actually. Just because you're wearing a mask doesn't mean you're practicing social distancing. We had thousands of people in Las Vegas over the weekend, thousands that were right next to each other marching down the streets. I understand you're angry. I understand you're upset. You're not practicing social distancing, and I understand it's very difficult to do that with a protest. But you cannot convince me that that everybody in that protest didn't have coronavirus. There are people still walking around that are asymptomatic, and I hope I'm wrong on this one, ladies and gentlemen. But I think we're going to see an uptick throughout the country. I really do in a few weeks. It could take up to 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, maybe longer, according to some experts. This is certainly not a good thing from a health perspective when you have all these people together, thousands and thousands of people. Now, there's a lot of other reasons why it's not good. I don't want people rioting. I don't want people looting. I don't want people ruining businesses. I don't want people, setting buildings on fire. I don't want clashes between law enforcement and protesters. I don't want people throwing rocks at the cops. There's a lot. I don't want rubber bullets hitting people. There's a lot of reasons why I don't want these things to happen. But something else you can just add to that list: coronavirus. And when Republicans say, wow, what happened? Did it just go away? No, dopes. It did not go away. The reason why the media, including Fox News, is covering these protests because it's a huge story. It's something that I have never seen before in my lifetime. It's a huge story.
Well, the point is, if coronavirus is this big of a deal and people are worried this much about it, then these protests shouldn't even be allowed to take place under those circumstances.
Well,
that's the argument. Like, for example, Chicago's Mayor Lori Lightfoot 2 weeks ago says that anyone who is caught not practicing social distancing will be arrested on the spot. And then 3 days ago, she changes her story and says police officers can't even break up groups of people that are protesting in Chicago. That's what people are angry about, and I'm one of those people because that makes zero sense whatsoever.
Well, there's a lot of things.
So now you had 40 million unemployed. You've probably got another, 3,000, 4,000 small businesses across the United States that are literally burnt to the ground.
That's not true.
That's not true.
There are 4,000 businesses that have been burnt. That's not true.
I'm just saying that's an estimation, Brian. Okay.
Well,
so you can't say it's not true, and I can't say it's true. I said probably, Brian. There were protests in like 35 cities in the last 2 or 3 days.
I understand, but
and the protests in almost every single one of those turned into a looting and a rioting. Brian, the Chanel in Soho last night.
That's not what you said. You said burnt to the ground. That's not true.
There is a lot of businesses across the country that have been burnt to the ground, and many of them are small businesses, like the bar owner in Minneapolis, who actually was able to get $700,000 through a GoFundMe page. But for example, like in Soho last night, the Chanel. The Chanel was literally looted completely. People were walking around New York City with bags up and down Soho, breaking into businesses and taking things. That's not about George Floyd. That's about getting a quick come up in the name of a dead man. That is utilizing, that is exploiting a tragedy to enrich yourself personally and destroy other people's personal property as well as their business assets.
All right, we got to take a break.
And that's an absolute embarrassment.